Hello guys, my name is Ivan and you're listening to Fantasy NBA GOAT, the greatest fantasy basketball podcast of all time. And as you can notice, it's me alone today, even though I promised you the last time that Purity will be here. We were planning to record podcast last weekend, but I broke my hand and we were running around looking for someone to fix my hand to get my hands plastered, to put a casket, and we were both stressed. We didn't do podcast. Now Purity is at work, so I hope we'll do podcast together when she has her days off, which will be Tuesday, Wednesday. Tuesday, Wednesday. So today, what we're going to do is we will talk only about fantasy basketball points leagues. So we're gonna talk about players that I'm not gonna say must, but you should draft. Players that you should not miss in a classic league, snaking league, round by round league, or in an auction draft, or as it's called nowadays, salary cap leagues. They changed the name. I don't know why. They're just confusing people, since you already have a salary cap for free agents, for waivers. So anyways, we're gonna start by positions. These are the players. Why I said that these are almost must draft players, because their value in fantasy points leagues is much higher than in typical category leagues. 8 cat, 9 cat. I mean by in standard leagues. So, for example, De'Aaron Fox is ranked. Again, we're using #basketball.com website. Great free website where you can find many informations. So this is from 2 days ago, this ADP. So 2 days ago, De'Aaron Fox was ranked, let me just see, 38.9, so 39th in a Yahoo. But his projection, we are talking about projections, of course, for the next league, is 15 in fantasy points leagues. So as you can see, he's almost 3 times better in fantasy points leagues, and he's the first guy on the list that we're gonna talk about, the guy that you should really not miss, because you can, if you're in a typical snaking draft, you can get the great value for him, considering the position where you're gonna draft him, meaning, of course, if you're not drafting him at the position 10 or 15, but later, if you draft him later, you can get 10 spots better position, or depending where you draft him, or if we are talking auction leagues, you're gonna pay him much less than he should he should be paid. So okay, let's start with him. As I said, projected to be ranked number 15. His total fantasy points projection is 43.84, comparing to the guy who is projected to be number 1, Nikola Jokic, 55.89. So you can see, as you can see, 12.5 12.05 fantasy points between two of them, and this is what is projected for him. And of course, before we started, I should have told you, but you probably know that if you're playing Fantasy Points League. But just in any case, if you are a beginner, and usually beginners start with Fantasy Points League, so let me just tell you the values for the categories. Fantasy Points Leagues, they have points, so 1 point is 1 fantasy point. Total rebounds, offensive, defensive, doesn't matter. 1 rebound is 1.2 fantasy points. 1 assist is 1.5 fantasy points, and steals is 3 points, blocks is 3 points, and turnover is -1. So as you know, you just add all that, deduct rebounds, and you get the number of fantasy points. It's simple. Numbers are almost round numbers. It's even easy to calculate in your head. So he's projected to have 25.97 fantasy points that he will get from points. Rebounds will give him 4.18 fantasy points, assist 10.74 fantasy points, steals 4.47, blocks 1.47, and steals -2.99. So 43.84 fantasy points. He can be, if you are in some default size, I don't know, 12 teams, snaking draft, he can be your second round pick. If you are drafting in an auction draft, he can be your first pick on a draft. For example, I'm planning on drafting him as my first player that I'm gonna draft in an auction draft, Fantasy Points League. Prior to this injury, there on this list was also Zion Williamson, but I would advise you to not to draft him high. I will avoid him, so it's up to you. I will avoid him on this draft. We still don't know when he will be back, and situation with his foot is still unclear. So I heard something today. December, January. I'm not sure. I heard something December, January. I'm not sure. So I'm not willing to wait that long for someone that I'm gonna draft this high. Another guy that is really bad. I'm not saying that De'Aaron Fox is really bad in category leagues. He's not great, but this guy is really not that good he's much better real life player. I'm talking about Ja Morant. In fantasy, in a category leagues, he is not good, but in a fantasy points leagues. He's projected to finish season as ranked at the position 31. As you know, he's a point guard. He's projected to have a 39.04 fantasy points, of course, per game. That's what we're talking about. He's projected to play 73 games, same as De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox only 4.8 fantasy points more than him. But as you can see, difference between them, it's 16 positions, 16 slots. So he's one of these guys. Then yeah, I know it's both of them are point guards, and it depends of your type of your league, but you should really not miss Ja Morant. He's projected to score 21.2 fantasy points from points category, in points category. Rebounds, yeah, just a second. Rebounds 5.36, assists 11.79 fantasy points, steals 3.03, and blocks 0.96. Turnovers will deduct 3.3 fantasy points, minus 3.3 fantasy points. Another guy that is not that great in category leagues, let me just find him, is D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell is projected to be ranked as 57. He's projected to he's point guard, shooting guard. He's projected to play 70 games, which will be okay if you get 70 games from D'Lo. That's decent for him. He's known to be injured really often. So 34.10 fantasy points for D'Angelo Russell. 19.95 will come from points, 3.4 from rebounds, assists, of course, 9.17, a lot. Steals 3.15, blocks 1.26, and turnovers minus 2.84. So yes, I know another point guard, but we are going position by position. So put all these guys on the list, and then just when you have list in front of you during the draft, you can choose. You will have list of point guard, shooting guard, small forwards, every position. So you will be, as you can see, they're separated by 15-20 positions. Which means that you can get one of these guys, no problem. So it would be useful for you to write it down, or just go to this site, find them, and you can keep this tab open while you're drafting, but I like having it written on a piece of paper. It's much easier than switching from one tab, my draft room, and to wherever else. So okay, let's do the third guy. And the third guy, I'm sorry, this is the fourth guy. The third guy was D'Lo. Fourth guy is Spencer Dinwiddie, also much better in fantasy points leagues. Projected to go number 64. So if you miss D'Lo, there is Spencer just 7 positions lower. Also point guard, shooting guard this year in Washington, as you know. He's projected to play 69 games for the Wizards. He's projected to score 32.88 fantasy points per game. Fantasy points that he will get from real points is 17.42, which of course means that he is projected to score 17.42 points because its ratio is 1-to-1. Rebounds 4.73 fantasy points. Assists 10.26. That's how much fantasy points you will get from his assists. Steals 2.49 fantasy points. Blocks 1.02. And turnovers minus 3.04. So we can also, well, I would stop here. I think this list is okay. We can do one more guy. Let's do one more guy. So you have 5 guys at this list. Let's just be quick. This guy is not top 100. This is Josh Giddey. He's a point guard, also available shooting guard for Oklahoma City. That's Josh Giddey, of course. A rookie, projected to play 70 games. He will get enough minutes in Oklahoma, and this number of fantasy points is really decent, 27.06. 10.45 points, 8 fantasy points from this. How much points he will score actually? 10.45, which is 10.5 fantasy points, of course. Total rebounds 8.21, assists 6.39, steals 3.57, blocks 1.47, and this is three turnovers, which means minus 3.03 fantasy points that he will lose at the turnover. So those were point guards. So let's continue with the shooting guards. So guys, we are continuing this one-handed podcast. Since I'm doing it only with my left hand, doing everything, scrolling, holding piece of paper, blah blah blah. But what you care about is not my hand, is who to draft as your shooting guard SG1, as you would say if you're as players of fantasy football would say. And at position number 1 is CJ McCollum. He's positioned at position 41, and as you know, CJ McCollum is considered by many people to be a boring fantasy player, and boring because he's consistent. He will always do his stuff every year. You cannot expect him to be much better or much worse than he has been in previous seasons. So many people do not like that, but also in fantasy points leagues he's really good, and at ADP 41 you can he will have 36 point. So you can open with, as you can see the strategies, you can open with Darren Fox or Ja Morant, or and then he can be your a second pick on a draft if you if that's your build. And when you're drafting in a fantasy points league, there is no punting. You don't think about builds that much. You don't care about categories. You don't care about nothing. Only thing that you care about is that you have enough of players to put on the slots that you need, meaning enough of player at every position, which is not really hard to do. So building a team is not such a tough thing to do. So that's why I said you can start with De'Aaron Fox and then maybe him, or Ja Morant. So anyways, it's up to you. CJ McCollum, 36.65 fantasy points per game, available also at point guard position, projected to play 72 games, points 22.69, 4.6 rebounds, 6.93 assists, 2.64 steals, 1.17 blocks, and minus 1.38 turnovers. I mean fantasy points for turnovers. Let's go to the next guy, and next guy is Colin Sexton, which is how many? Only 9 position lower, number 50. Yes, in category leagues you don't get much from him, but you don't care about that in fantasy points leagues. Only thing you care about are points, and that is what he will give you. Available at point guard and shooting guard. 35.18 points, projected to play 75 games, 23.91 fantasy points, rebounds 3.85, assists 6.33, steals 3.3, and blocks 0.6 fantasy points, turnovers minus 2.81 fantasy points for Cleveland guard. Next guy is a rookie, and that's a rookie from Orlando Magic. As you know, that's Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs also available. Well, here we have him in a shooting guard, and that in a shooting guard group, which is he is available as shooting guard. He will be a point guard for Orlando probably. I mean, surely. He was not that great in this preseason, but still. There are high hopes for him. It's not like there are many great and many healthy players over there. As you know, Jonathan Isaac is not ready for the season. So number 78 for Jalen Suggs, 30, projected to play 73 games, 30.87 fantasy points, 15.28 fantasy points coming from points, 5.16 total rebounds, 8.12 assists. I mean fantasy points from assists, 4.32 fantasy points for steals, 0.94 blocks, and minus 2.91 for blocks. Okay, the next guy I want to talk about right now, because that's Caris LeVert. We don't know he might be ready for the opening, he might not. So I don't want to put him on a list of guys that you should draft and then he misses a lot of time and then you start inboxing me and telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's a risk, and he might go high. He's kind of well-known name, so I would, if you can get him really late, if you can get him really cheap, and if there is some news before, I'm hoping you're drafting this weekend. If there is if you find out something about his status, then consider him, but we're not gonna talk about him now. We're gonna talk about Tyler Herro. We're gonna talk about Tyler Herro as soon as I find Tyler Herro here on the list, and I did. This year he's only point guard. Last year he was available at point guard, shooting a small forward position, which was great for fantasy. He got taken 2 positions, and this is kind of handicap, but it is what it is. 2 years ago he was really hyped up after that bubble performance. Last year, bad season for him, but not that bad as people remember it, and he's going really low this season, so you might consider him. He's not must draft, but in the later rounds of drafts, as you can, okay, I didn't say he's ranked 119, so for the later rounds of draft you might consider him, because he's he's projected to play 70 games, fantasy points 26.15, 14.69 fantasy points coming from points. He's been shooting really well, I mean scoring a lot in preseason, so this 14.69, meaning this is almost 15 points. It might be higher, might be better. Rebounds 5.8, assists 4.91 fantasy points, steals 1.71, blocks 0.87, and steals minus 1.83. So the next guy that was a sleeper until a few weeks ago, and I don't think he's sleeper anymore, that's Jordan Poole. Everybody's talking about him now. I don't know, depending on your league, how competitive your league is, it will depend if he's sleeper or not, if you can get him cheap or get him late. So 130 point guard, shooting guard. As you know, he will play as long as Clay is injured, but even when the Clay returns, he will still have he will still have a room and minutes in Golden State, and of course it depends how he opens the season, how he plays this part of the season where he will be, where the Golden State will be without Clay. So 25.58 fantasy points per season. Point guard, shooting guard available, 74 games, projected to play 16.94 fantasy points coming from points, 3.05 coming from total rebounds, 4.04 coming from assists, 2.1 from steals, 0.87 fantasy points coming from blocks, and minus 1.42 for turnovers. So the only guy left we have is, I will have to make a short pause and find this guy. Okay, I have found him. We're gonna talk about Kevin Porter Jr. He's he's here number 51, projected to be 51st. As you know, his situation in Houston and everything what happened over there. He's a good guy. He's a good player to target. 35.07 fantasy points. Shooting guard, small forward available. 70 game projected to play for the Rockets. 18.11 fantasy points from points. 4.99 from total rebounds. 10.58 from assists. 33.54 from steals. 1.14 from blocks, and minus 3.22. Those are turnovers. And the last guy, okay, maybe we let's talk about two more guys. This podcast is gonna be really long. I'm just hoping it's helpful. Okay, let's talk about RJ Barrett, 75th here on the list. As you know, he's good fantasy points guy, player. Not such a great in category leagues. Doesn't do many things in many categories. Doesn't do a lot of things in many categories. But fantasy points, decent, maybe even very good depending on your league size. 31.44. Shooting guard, small forward for the Knicks. 75 games projected. He's projected to play 75 games. 18.6 fantasy points. 7.06 total rebounds. 4.65 fantasy points coming from the assists. 2.16 from steals. 0.93 from blocks, and minus 1.96 from fantasy points deducted because of his turnovers. So let's go over and talk about small forwards now. I thought we do one more shooting guard, but we did enough. I think 7 shooting guards, so this podcast is getting really long, and I don't want you to lose patience. So I'm gonna try to do it as quick as possible now. So we are going straight to Andrew Wiggins, who is number 80. As you know, he will play now all the games since he got vaccinated. Actually projected to play 74 games for Golden State Warriors. He's available at shooting guard and small forward slot. He's projected to score 30.52 fantasy points, 17.74 fantasy points. He'll score for you from. You will get from him from real points. I mean, from rebounds, that will be 5.62 fantasy points. 3.45 fantasy points from assists, 2.55 from steals, 2.88 from blocks, and minus 1.72 from deducted because of turnovers. Next guy that I have here on the list. Okay, we're gonna talk about him later. Let's talk now about the guy who is one position in front of Andrew Wiggins, 79, ranked as 79, Keldon Johnson from San Antonio Spurs. As you know, not great in category leagues, but also, as you know, there is no DeMar DeRozan over there anymore. So it's definitely he will be scoring more fantasy points than the last season. He's available at small forward, power forward positions, 30.61. So 30.61 projected to play fantasy points, projected to play 74 games this season and to score 16.44 points, fantasy points, however you want it. It's the same. Rebounds, 7.75 fantasy points from rebounds, 3.3 from assists, 3.03 from steals, 1.29 from blocks, and minus 1.2 from turnovers. So yeah, I think that many people will be loan him, and that he might be. This is a lot of fantasy points, so you can get him low or cheap depending on type of draft that you will be doing. So another guy, let me find him. I found him. Another guy is Anthony Edwards, and he is ranked at 48. This is his second season. Shooting guard, small forward. He's projected to score averagely 35.59 fantasy points and to play 77 games, which is a lot. 21.48 points, fantasy points, 5.92 fantasy points from rebounds, 5.27 from assists, 3.66 from steals, 1.62 from blocks, coming from blocks, and minus 2.36 deducted because of turnovers. So yes, Anthony Edwards, if you can get him low or cheap, yeah, do not hesitate. He will be good fantasy points leagues player. So I just wanted to talk about one more guy. Let him find him. I think I'm talking about Jonathan Isaac. And Jonathan Isaac said that, well, I think we're talking too much about Jonathan Isaac on this podcast, but what can we do? I love Jonathan Isaac, I guess. Probably because I have him in my Dynasty League, but he's the risk. He's not must draft. He's the guy who probably he probably won't start the season, even though he said that he's ready, and if it was up to him, he would start the season. But news from the Magic, the news are that he won't start, that he might even start around Christmas, which is, I don't know, crazy. If you ask me, he's been injured now for, I even forgot. It's a lot, like 15. Is it? I don't even. I don't have a number in front of me, but he's been treating that injury for a long time. So if you can afford to wait for him until the end of December, I don't know what to tell you. It might pay off, but still, after that, he's not gonna play back-to-backs. He's projected to play 56 games here at this site. He's small for power forward, available, projected to score 24.65 fantasy points per game. 9.61 points, rebounds 6 point, rebounds 6 11 fantasy points coming from the rebounds, coming from assists 1.58, 3.60 from steals, and 4.80 from blocks. I think this should be much higher if you ask me. These steals and blocks, he's been much better prior to his injury, and steals minus 1.05 fantasy points. So this risk is on you. I'm not recommending anything. Keeping him in my Dynasty League, but that's because my Dynasty League has 4 IL slots, so think well before you decide what you're gonna do about him. So those are all small forwards. So let's go and talk about power forwards now. So power forwards, as I said, Zion, yes, he's projected to be number 16 here in fantasy points leagues, 43.15 fantasy points per game. He's a power forward to play 60 games, and I'm not gonna bother with the rest of his stats. As you know, he's injured. Not many useful, relevant information regarding his injury. I'm gonna stay away at this position. I would, and for this money, I would rather draft De'Aaron Fox, who they're basically gonna score, is projected to score almost the same number of fantasy points. If you're willing to take a risk, by all means, but I plan to draft him if I had a chance, but I decided not to. The guy that I will try to get is Julius Randle, projected to be number 23. I think he will be higher, but okay, I'm reading projections from this site. 40 points, 77 fantasy points. 41.14 fantasy points. He's power forward and center. He's projected to play 77 games to score 22.1 points, and of course fantasy points. Rebounds, this is 11.71 fantasy points coming from his rebounds, 7.13 fantasy points from assists, 2.58 from steals, 0.87 from blocks, minus 3.25 from turnovers. So the next guy is Marvin Bagley, the third next guy. As you know, people are low on Marvin Bagley, and you can get him late, you can get him cheap at auction draft, but in fantasy points leagues he's not that bad as many people think, and you can get some value for your bucks. So he's projected to go as to finish the season as 118. He's power forward center for Kings. He's still in Kings, you know, all the things that happened during the summer, him wanting to leave and with his dad and all that, but maybe he'll have something to prove now, and maybe we finally get one good season from Bagley. Maybe he'll be healthy throughout the season. This site doesn't project that. They say that he will play 62 games, that he will score 26.18 fantasy points. I think it might be higher than that. This is not that many fantasy points. As you know, he scores, he rebounds. That's pretty much what he does, what he's good at. Here they say 14.17 fantasy points coming from points. I think it can be higher. 8.92 from rebounds. That should be higher too. 1.5 fantasy points for rebound. Assists. The same 1.5 for steals and 1.5 for blocks. Turnovers minus 1.41. And the last power forward that we are going to talk about is Rui Hachimura. Also not that great in the category leagues. In the fantasy points leagues, maybe 100, top 100, 110, like the best situation. Here he's projected to be 146. Also, same as Bagley in fantasy points leagues, he's not that bad. He's, as I can see here, available as small forward, power forward. 24.41 fantasy points. That's what's projected per season for him. Also, he's projected to play 70 games, 14.02 points, fantasy points, 6.72 fantasy points from rebounds. For assists, 2.13 fantasy points, for steals 2.46, for blocks 0.3, and for turnovers minus 1.22. Those were power forwards. And the last group of guys, the centers. We start with Jusuf Nurkic from Portland, center. He's projected to finish at 45, rank 45. Projected to play 69 games this season, to score averagely to 36.36 fantasy points. That's 14.74 coming from points, 12.07 for rebounds, 4.5 for assists, 3.03 for steals, 4.62 for blocks, and minus 2.6 for turnovers. The next guy, I'm sorry if you hear in the background some neighbors, I don't know, doing something, drilling, whatever, cutting something, I guess. That's normal in my neighborhood, even though it's time where people rest. And now he made me forget what the guy. I wanted to talk about Montrezl Harrell. I'm trying to find him. Thank you very much, neighbor. I completely got disturbed. Okay, Montrezl Harrell, 108, projected to finish as at that rank. He is a power forward center. He's in Washington Wizards this season. He's projected to play 68 games for Wizards and to score in average 26.92 fantasy points, 13.7 fantasy points for points, for rebounds 8.06. 1.79 for assists, 2.28 for steals, 2.28 for blocks, and minus 1.19 for turnovers. Next guy is Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee, power forward, center, projected to finish as number 91. This season he will be playing for The Hornets projected to play 68 games. I don't know if I already said that. And to score in average 29.14 fantasy points, 10.03 points, fantasy points, however you want, 10.79 from coming from rebounds, 5.21 coming from assist, 2.34 fantasy points for steals, 2.61 for blocks. As you know, he doesn't block that much, and minus 1.84 for fantasy points deducted because of turnovers. Yeah, so the next guy that we're gonna talk about is LaMarcus Aldridge, and let me just make a short break while I find LaMarcus. Yeah, LaMarcus Aldridge, he might be he should be your last pick, flyer, call it however you want. He's projected to be ranked 180. He's projected to play only 55 games this season. His power forward center, 22.34 fantasy points, 11.48 points, fantasy points, 5.36 rebound fantasy points coming from the rebounds, 2.18 coming from the assists, 1.26 coming from the steals, 2.91 for blocks, and minus 0.85 coming from turnovers. And the last center that we're gonna talk about, it's Alperen Şengün. It's a guy from Turkish League, MVP of Turkish League, a rookie. He might be maybe 120. That's like the best scenario here. He's projected to be 178. That's his rank. To play 70 games, he's a center, for Houston Rockets. He's projected to score 22.39 fantasy points per season, 10.46 fantasy points, whatever. Rebound 7.62 fantasy points coming from rebounds, 1.82 coming from assists, for 40 steals, 1.83 for blocks, 2.55, and for turnovers minus 89. And there is one guy that I think that I forgot. So I hope I forgot him. Don't be mad at me if I talk about this guy again, because like my hand really hurts and this neighbor is annoying with this cutting stuff, and like I'm kind of forgettable lately since I'm not that young. But no, I didn't talk about him, I'm sure. If I am, just skip this part. I'm sorry, but I think I didn't, and I think I don't want to miss this guy. This is Aaron Gordon from Denver. Yeah, we definitely didn't talk about him. He might be interesting because he was hyped for many years. People finally gave up on him, and now you can get him cheaply, and he's not that bad that you should skip. In fantasy points leagues, he's good, like decent, as I said, 98 rank. He's projected to play 72 games, small forward, power forward, available, projected to score 27.74 fantasy points per season. 13.29 fantasy points, coming from points, 7.26 fantasy points coming from rebounds. For assists, he's projected to get 4.68 fantasy points. For steals, 2.28, and the same for blocks, 2.28. And turnovers, minus 2.05. He might be here. He's projected 98. Yeah, that's about right. Around 110, maybe. This is maybe the best scenario for him, which is not bad. So those were all the guys from the list, all the players from the list. So guys, that was episode 44. Thank you for sticking with me. I know it was not that fun like the last episode or the episodes where the purity is here, but I hope it was informative. We talked a lot about stats, but I think this is really useful for fantasy points leagues, and I think I will be using this strategy, so I think it can help you winning your league. So you can find us. Our website address is fantasynbagoat.weebly.com. Our social networks, you can find us at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at FantasyNBAGoat. And you can listen to our podcast wherever you listen your podcasts, or any podcatcher, or wherever. You can find us, of course, at Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, of course, Anchor, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, literally everywhere. That's it. I don't know. I didn't forget anything to say, and I cannot promise. I keep promising you that Purity will be here, and I just hope we'll do podcasts on Wednesday or Tuesday, Wednesday, and while she's here. And see you then. Thank you for listening. Bye.
So, yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And what can I say? Mamba out.